tax relief, housing changes, and billions in new investments. Ontario's 2026 budget is packed with big moves, but will it actually help businesses grow, compete, and invest? Let's find out in this episode of the MBOT TV's Zoomcast. Hi, everyone. I'm David Wojcik for MBOT TV. Ontario's 2026 budget is here, but is it enough to power the real growth? In this episode, we break down the Ontario budget and what it means for businesses, investment, and economic stability. To help us with the discussion is Armando Minicucci. Armando is a partner with Doan Grant Thornton's tax practice, specializing in succession and estate planning for private businesses, high net worth individuals, and not-for-profits. He is a member of CPA Ontario and the Canadian Tax Foundation and the Mississauga Estate Planning Council. Welcome, Armando.
Thank you, David.
Armando, let's dive in with the deficit and how you feel that's going to have an impact on businesses, our economy, and business in general. We were probably looking at somewhere between $7 and $8 billion. The budget has come in with deep red ink in the $12 to $13 billion range. So what's your feeling on that deficit? How do you think it's going to affect the overall economy and eventually businesses and residents of Ontario?
You know, David, I was quite surprised to see yesterday's budget. Quite surprised because, we recently had a projection that we were expecting that, for the current year, they were expecting a deficit of $14 billion. We came in somewhere around $12 billion, which is good. So a little bit of a savings there, which was good news. But the real news is the fact that, we were projecting a deficit of $7.8 billion for the current year. And yesterday they announced they're now projecting that to be $13.8 billion. That is off by $6 billion. That's a big number. And then you take that further out one additional year where we were expecting, Ontario announced that we were going to have a balanced budget for fiscal, 27-28. And instead, they're now projecting another $6 billion deficit for that year. In totality, that's $12 billion off of their original projection. That's a big number. And as an accountant, I find it very difficult to understand how you could be off by $12 billion. But I understand these are difficult times.
Armando, that's because you are an accountant. You're not a politician. That falls in the category of that's a political oopsie, and don't worry about it. We'll make it up in the political world. Let's talk about the HST rebate. This is a big one. It was announced in Mississauga by the Premier, along with Mayor Carolyn Parrish, just a few days ago. This is an HST rebate, which virtually eliminates the HST on all of the new home purchases, not just new home buyers, but new home purchases, condos, whatever it happens to be. How do you feel that was received by the business community, and what do you think that it's going to, or what kind of impact do you think it's going to have on the economy?
Well, I'll personally say that I think we've waited a long time to see a housing rebate that's been adjusted to current market values. Because I will tell you, back in 1991, when the GST came in, they had thresholds of, you were entitled to rebates on new houses for your primary use on values of $450,000 or less. And the rebate program has been stuck at that $450,000 threshold since 1991. So it's great to see that we're looking at it. So I think it's great, welcome news. It's a significant savings for home buyers. For a house here in Ontario, the Ontario's kicking in their 8% and the feds are going to kick in their 5%. So that's $130,000 on $1 million home. And I think that's a welcome incentive for individuals to go out and buy. It is still, it's buying a house here in Ontario is not inexpensive. It's a major transaction that involves a lot of thought. And the fact that we have both our federal government and Ontario government aligned that they will grant rebates, I think that's fantastic. And this, mirrors. There's also a program for the first-time home buyers that was also announced, but just specifically this program that was announced. So the current program will allow for a rebate of the full HST on home purchases of up to $1 million. That's $130,000 on $1 million house. Now, to qualify, you have to enter into a purchase agreement between April 1st of 2026 to March 31st of 2027. So the program is in effect for 1 year. While it's a very good incentive, and we expect obviously that it's going to motivate purchasers to actually go out and make that purchase. But we would also expect the results of this would be increasing the economy through engaging our trades, more construction. So we're expecting it to definitely move the market. I would say this was a welcomed announcement by the Ontario government, and the fact that we're in alignment with the federal government, I think that's fantastic. So it's the full 13%, and I think those are quite an incentive for those that really need that little extra motivation in order to go out and buy that home.
Well, I think they're going to need to take a look at this on a longer term basis, because in order to accomplish what the federal government and the provincial government and municipal governments want to do is to actually increase the number of houses that are being built and are available. And just having a program in for a year will not do that, because we know if a developer decides today that they want to develop homes, finding the property, buying the property, doing the environmental assessment, all of that work before the houses even start to get built, we're going to need to address that. Let's talk about the provincial corporate tax. I'd like to get your reaction to the reduction on the corporate tax rate for small business. What do you think that's going to do for small business? A lot of small businesses say to me, well, I'm not making any money anyways, so what does a tax reduction mean to me? I'm in the hole. But what say you, Armando?
David, that's very intuitive of you to actually look through it and recognize that, yes, a lot of Ontario businesses are not making a lot of money. You add to that the fact that we've already had previous announcements that allow for immediate deductions and expensing of capital purchases through our accelerated capital cost allowance system. So you're right in the fact that most Ontario businesses are not necessarily paying a lot of taxes right now, but for those that are, this is a good measure. It's a good measure because it drops the collective federal and Ontario corporate tax rate on the first $500,000 of annual earnings. Right now, currently, the tax rate is 12.2%, which is very low in comparison to the general rate in Ontario, which is 26.5. So the 12.2 rate will drop to 11.2 come July 1st of 2026. So that's a welcome change. It's an extra to 1% savings on taxes on the first $500,000 of annual earnings. The anticipation is that the business owners will use that cash. They'll use it to pay down debt, buy additional assets, hire more employees, spur the economy. That's the intention behind the 1% decline. Now, along with that, we operate in a system where we have what we refer to as a fully integrated tax system, meaning that whether you earn $1 of income personally or whether you earn it through a corporate structure, the ultimate tax needs to be the same. So what they've also announced to go along with the rate reduction for corporate taxes, they've also announced that the tax rate that you pay on what we refer to as non-eligible dividends will also go up in order to put the ultimate total tax burden at the same amount as it was before. Now, that is a good measure, except for the fact that when you look at, there are businesses out there that are not entitled to the small business deduction, but do generate and pay out their distributions as non-eligible dividends. And those businesses or those corporations will be hit with a higher overall tax rate once they distribute the profits out of their corporation, because those profits come out at non-eligible rates. So there are some consequences that are going to fall out of this that may not necessarily be tied directly to small businesses, but nonetheless, from a small business perspective, there is definitely a cash flow savings for those that do pay tax at this point.
Armando, we've got about a minute left, and I'd like you to get to react to the post-secondary education and skills development amount of money that's being pumped into the system. $6.4 billion for post-secondary education. It's supposed to strengthen that talent pipeline, support research and innovation, and commercialization. How do you think that's going to affect businesses in Ontario?
I think, first of all, spending money on education is extremely important. Right now, you look at the gap in our skills right now, it's very significant. While, there's a lot of people out there that are unemployed and looking for work, at the same time, there are jobs out there. The challenge we have is connecting the availability of talent with the actual skill set that's required for the job. So investing more money in our post-secondary education system and skills development is very critical. And I think that is something that our business community will benefit from.
Well, as the saying goes, Armando, the devil's in the details. So we'll see how this all shakes out when we see all of the information that falls out after this budget. My guest has been Armando Minicucci from Doane Grant Thornton. And the topic today has been the Ontario budget. I'm David Wojcik for MBOT TV. And as always, we wish you continued success in your business.